Commander, fellow Toastmasters, distinguished guests. How many of you own a dog? Or have ever owned a dog? Or resolved to own a dog, made a resolution to own a dog, or wanted a dog? That's most of you. Well, I never owned a dog. I just came back recently from Canada. I'm a little bit down on dogs. At the house that I was staying, in fact, I was in charge of this little dog for a while. It was a Maltese Shih Tzu mix. I don't know if any of you have seen those dogs, but it's a tiny little lap dog. But what it lacked in size, it makes up for in voice power, in lung power, in barking. I mean, it was an incredible, incredible volume. This dog, it sounded like screeching brakes, the sound quality, but it was much louder and choppier, and the barks were per minute, really impressive. When someone came in, when someone left, for no reason at all, this dog would go off and bark. And so I'm just not enthusiastic. In fact, I'm convinced at this point that cats are looking more attractive to me. And in fact, I'm convinced that cats are smarter than dogs. I know I'm in a hostile audience when I say that, but you know, I don't know where you're going to find 8 cats that will pull a sled through snow. It's just not going to happen. So, but people love cats. For some reason, people love cats. I was at a, my parents-in-law were living in a retirement home when we were visiting them, and there was a guy in this retirement home who was there alone. His wife was living in a house with 89 cats. And I don't know the story behind how he got there, but I could just imagine what happens. He's sitting at breakfast one morning trying to read his paper, and you know, the cat's kind of walking across the table, and here and there, the litter boxes everywhere, and he finally slams down the paper and says, either the cats go or I go. And so he was in this retirement home. But you know, even if you don't like cats, you gotta love kittens. I was with a friend of mine who was, when I was in college, and I just remember walking with my friend Frank one time, and there's this little kitten following us. He says, kittens are great. You can do anything to a kitten and it'll always come back to you. So, and to prove it, he took this little kitten up and he kind of petted it a couple of times to establish a binding. Then he swung it around the air and threw it up, and it landed in this middle of this ivy patch, completely disappeared. And then you see a few seconds later a little piece of ivy moving here, and a little piece of ivy moving here, and then pretty soon you can see the trail. It comes out, he picks it up, he swings it around again, he tosses it, shunk, lands in the ivy again, does the same thing 2 or 3 times. Very impressive. But I think the man upstairs must be a cat lover, because over the next number of weeks I kind of saw cat vengeance on poor Frank. The first one I actually had an opportunity to be part of is that, you know, at Davis when we were at, it was very, very hot at night. And so I'd often be out late studying or doing something else. And one night it was about 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm coming home to our apartment. And there's this cat that was there. It's the ugliest cat I have ever seen. It's a very big, fat, dirty gray cat. It was a male cat. It had been in a few fights, lost a few, I mean, some scars. One eye was completely gone, and there was always a little pus dripping down the eye. And so coming home that night, I made friends with the cat, and then I picked it up and brought it into our apartment. And you know, the way it was set up is there's it was kind of dormish type thing where you have a room here with 2 guys sleeping and a room here with 2 guys sleeping in. So I went to where Frank and Dave were asleep, and I just kind of opened up the door gently and kind of sent the cat in and shut the door, and then went to bed. And I heard about it the next morning, and apparently after an hour or 2 of exploring the room, the cat got bored and jumped up on the bed, on the foot of the bed, and of course it was really hot and no air conditioning, so these guys are sleeping without the covers on. So the cat jumps up and starts licking Frank's toes. So Frank kind of startles and wakes up and sees this silhouette of this animal against the foot of the bed. He goes, Dave, don't make a move. There's a giant rat waiting like that. So, he didn't know what it was. And these guys were so freaked out that even when they got the light on, they saw a cat, had no idea how it got in there. It was an ugly cat. They were afraid to touch apologies. They spent the next 45 minutes kind of herding this cat first out of their room and then out of the apartment. And it wasn't too long later that Frank was coming home late one night, and the guys up, we had a hallway that went down to our room, and on the top of that was a balcony. And the guys up on top were, well, they had a sense of humor. They were in a biology class, and one of their tasks in the biology class was to dissect a cat. And they got into the stage where they'd skin the cat. I don't know if you've ever seen a skinned cat, but it's not very pretty. You know, it's kind of ugly, and it's got all the white muscles there, and it's really kind of... And so they got the idea that they had tied a rope to the leg of one of these cats, and they were just waiting for a victim, and Frank happened to be the victim. And he walked by, and he's kind of looking to try to get into his door, and these guys are on the balcony with this cat, and they kind of lower the cat over, and then they're swinging it back and forth. And so as Frank's over here opening the door, he feels a tap on his shoulder. And then he turns around, and in comes his skinned cat right at him. Right. So he takes off, and he does a minute mile down the walkway. Now, Frank might not have learned a lesson from all of this, but I sure have learned a lesson, and I pass it along to you. Be kind to kids. Good day, I'm Toastmaster.